Shalom. This week's Sedra is Sedra Ki Teitzei. Although it's only briefly mentioned, one of the more well-known mitzvos of the Torah appears in this week's Torah portion. The mitzvah to send the mother bird away from its eggs and the rarely offer reward of long life is commanded in this week's Torah portion. This mitzvah is fascinating to the commentators in the Torah for it combined so many different Jewish values and philosophical tenets. It also leads to an understanding of divine reward and punishment. We read in this week's Torah portion, if, along the road, you chance upon a bird's nest in any tree or on the ground with fledglings or eggs, and the mother sitting over the fledglings or on the eggs, do not take the mother together with her young. Let the mother go and take only the young in order that you may fare well and have a long life. In his commentary on this verse, the Cheskuni wrote, the reward will be far greater for listening to God than whatever benefit or profit you would have had received if you had taken the mother and bird and its young for yourself. The idea of balancing reward and punishment for performing a mitzvah against the gain and loss of not performing the mitzvah was a topic discussed by Rabbi Yehuda in Pirkei Avos. Yehuda Nasi said, balance the loss incurred by the fulfillment of a mitzvah against the gain and the reward from a transgression against the loss it involves. In his commentary on this teaching, balancing the loss incurred by the fulfillment of a mitzvah against the gain, Rabbi Yonah explained that a person might be hesitant to fulfill a mitzvah because in fulfilling the mitzvah, the person might lose out on an opportunity, maybe or pleasure or enjoyment. Therefore, when thinking of the loss that might be incurred by fulfilling a mitzvah, a person should think of the reward he will gain by performing the mitzvah. The idea of Rabbi Yonah of imagining divine reward for the fulfillment of mitzvos only appeals to those on a lofty level. For most people, the idea of divine reward only motivates and inspires so much. At times, what a person is giving up to perform a mitzvah might be so enjoyable that the thought of reward after death doesn't carry a person long enough to have them do the mitzvah. There is a second reward of mitzvos. Not only is divine reward promised, but a meaningful life of intangible value is also promised. Therefore, a person should think that leading a value-led life is more crucial than simply achieving the next pleasure offered. In this Mishnah, Yehuda Nasi was also quoted as having taught in one of the more counterintuitive lessons of Pirkei Avos, balance the reward from a transgression against the loss it involves. What reward comes from a transgression? In his commentary to the Mishnah, Rabbi Yonah wrote that a person might fool themselves into thinking that the pleasure that stems from a sin is greater than any reward that might stem from restricting oneself from committing that sin. He wrote that one's reward for listening to God will always be greater than the pleasure one gets from committing the sin. How can one be certain that Rabbi Yonah is correct? Maybe there are certain transgressions whose pleasure is great, but whose punishment is relatively minor. Pleasure in our existence is limited to physical pleasure, or pleasure that stems from being physical. These pleasures are by definition temporal. In contrast, divine reward is eternal. Eternity always trumps temporality, and therefore a person should always sin and temporary pleasure for the reward, eternal reward of listening to God. The mitzvah of sending the mother bird away teaches so many lessons past just the command to send the mother away. This mitzvah acts as a paradigm to most mitzvos. There's more than meets the eye when you study it in depth. What an important lesson. Shalom.